Hello everybody, thank you so much for your patience with us. Sorry we're a few moments late today. I hope everybody can hear us okay. Today, as you know, is all about the Unit 4, the packaging project for your diploma. So I'm going to hand you over to Ian in a moment. Just a bit of housekeeping, please. If you have any questions at all that are relevant to the topic that Ian's talking about, please could you put them in the Q&A at the bottom there. And what's going to happen is when Ian's got through them all, through the whole presentation, he's then going to address the questions then, rather than as he's going along, just in case he stops his flow, as it were. And we know, anybody knows Ian, you don't want to do that. So meanwhile, obviously there is the chat function on also that's available. If anybody has any problems, they can tell me about with sound or anything that they need technically like that, if they need any help with. So I'm going to be quiet. Hope you enjoy it. To say any questions, you're very welcome to type them in now, but we won't be answering them until the end. So I'm going to hand you over now to Ian. So thanks very much.
Okay, I think hopefully you should be able to hear me. So hello everybody, and welcome to this presentation on the Unit 4 Packaging Project. Before I start, hopefully most of you will know who I am, but if you don't, I'm one of the tutors for the IOM3 Training Academy. I've prepared a presentation which is quite text heavy, so I don't intend to go through every word, every sentence and so on, and I will concentrate on some elements. So hopefully if this will let me do the next page. There we are. Okay, so agenda. So that's what we're going to go through this in this presentation. There will be, like Joe says, time for questions at the end. So let me start by just giving you a little bit of background. Just to remind you, to achieve the Level 5 Diploma in Packaging Technology qualification, you need to actually get 48 credits. And as you should know, the diploma is divided into 4 units. So 1, 2, 3 are examined and they have credit values, and Unit 4, packaging related research project, has a credit value of 10. So again, little reminder, what's a credit? It's approximately 10 learning hours, but a learning hour can be many things. It can be doing some market research, or reading your book, or journals or magazines, industry visits, videos, trials, tests, whatever. It's a whole mixture of things. So it is important to appreciate that the packaging project may well take you some time and effort to actually complete. So a little bit now about what is a project, or packaging project overview. Basically, it's designed to enable you to apply what you've learned, what you know about a particular project. It might be within your own company, it might be outside, but you need to specify what's learned, look at what research and tests, and then actually report. You can get information from all sorts, but all I would really recommend you do is talk to tutors, go to colleagues in the workplace or beyond, and also you've got your fellow students. you could argue, excuse me, you could argue there's no single right or wrong way to prepare or present a project, because all projects can be different, but there are some rules you need to follow. I'm sure you will recognize learning outcomes, so I will come back to those shortly. Just remember that each learning outcome have a number of assessment criteria which you need to cover. So what's a project? So the project is differentiating Unit 4 from the examined parts of Units 1 to 3. And the beauty about the project is that there is a certain degree of freedom in how you treat the subject or the topic and how you then present your finished work. It's got to be packaging related. It should be investigational and with an uncertain outcome. That depends a little bit on what you're doing. Ideally, in the workplace, be of something of value to the organization, address a need, and if it is supported by your employer, that's quite helpful, because you could argue that you can do this in work time. But what is really important is that you should be able to relate what you've learned to a specific issue or problem that you've actually decided upon. You need to be able to demonstrate that you can research a topic in depth and evaluate whatever sources of information, literature, better, and at the end of it, derive appropriate conclusions. Yes, you can do desktop background research, but ideally you want to go out and collect primary data. So you may well want to do, if you're talking to suppliers about what their views are or what they recommend, you may interview them. You can do surveys using SurveyMonkey or something akin. You may hopefully be able to visit factories or engage in line trials and so on. So this is the area where most people start is, what do I actually want to talk about? So what I've done is I've taken a PyABC document, which lists a whole range of ideas, and I've put them down over a number of slides, and then I've summarized them in a final slide. So I'll walk through this with you. So it could be identifying an existing business process and carry out a review to see whether it can be improved or not. That can be quite an interesting one if you are not able to go down onto a production line to carry out trials. You might be able to look at newer alternative technologies. At the current moment, people are still considering whether to move from, say, single-use plastics to an alternative material. Products that have been traditionally in cans or jars are moving into pouch packs, but that can cause issues depending on how the container is actually made and runs down a production line. You might look at improving a pack or a business process. So you could research solutions and make recommendations. A very popular one is either value adding or a cost saving opportunity. That's been done many times. You know, shall we reduce the amount of material that we're going to use, or shall we try and improve line speeds? And you then have to build a case to actually implement it. Don't be surprised, though, if you do something like this, in that actually you may find that it doesn't actually go ahead. So in theory, you could fail, but still pass the project because you've demonstrated that, you know, what you've done isn't going to go ahead for one reason or another. Again, another popular one is, you know, oh dear, we have a customer complaint, we have a packaging problem of some form, things aren't running down lines for whatever reason. Supply chain damage, again, major issue. Remember, when products leave your factory, you have more or less lost control. And trying to understand that supply chain, especially today with an awful lot of products being sold through online sites, is quite an interesting topic to explore. You can look at evaluation and assessment of packaging performances from a variety of perspectives. It doesn't always have to be in the area that you work in. It does give you the opportunity to actually look at alternative not sectors, but roles and responsibilities that you may not actually have experience of. Compliance with legislation is another one that is quite an interesting one. I suppose the topical one at the moment is the inclusion of a certain percentage of recycled content within packaging materials. But there are, depending on the sector you work in, you may actually be involved in other legislation which impacts on you. You know, in pharmaceuticals, you know, there are some quite specific pieces of legislation that you have to comply with. Again, another one which is similar to a topic above is looking at a standard operating procedure. Most companies will have long lists of SOPs. It may be that some are good and some are not so good. So you could look at that side of the business and then make recommendations to resolve them. Another one which is quite popular is looking at the modification or optimization of a packing line. Now, people might look at increasing line speeds, and that might mean, you know, increasing the automation. Automation has the horrible effect of meaning that all of your packaging components need to have tighter tolerances. You know, that can create quite a big issue and needs quite a lot of work to actually make sure it does go ahead. Another way is, I suppose it's pertinent at the moment, and there's another bullet point in a minute, you might want to look at consumer or customer opinion of something you are doing. So that can be integrated with maybe something else. Again, you might be able to choose an existing pack or packaging material and look for alternatives. Again, that might be, shall we look at, bio-based materials and work out whether they are suitable or not. And then finally, on this list of topic ideas, and I suppose this is very, very topical, is an analysis of the current situation. As I'm sure all of you are aware, the current COVID-19 outbreak has affected supply chains in a myriad of different ways, and that could be something to consider. So what I've done is I've just listed everything down. And the reason I've done that is just to say there's lots and lots of ideas there. And you might be able to pick one element out and then actually combine it with something else. Some of you will no doubt recall a story I might have told in the past of a student who was sitting at their desk one day and a customer complaint letter landed on the desk. And they looked at it and said, oh, and it was basically a complaint about sticky barcode labels. And the student looked at this and thought, why has this come to me? And she rang the customer service department and said, do we get many complaints like this? And customer service said, well, not really, but we thought you were the right person to answer the complaint. And she looked at the complaint and thought, sticky barcode labels. That is a bit of a pain, isn't it? You buy something and you can't actually get the label off, or if you do, you're left with a residue. So she actually created she did a survey monkey, created this survey and to ask people's opinions. She got hundreds of responses from all the people she sent it to, most of them grumbling in the same way. So she then decided she would actually investigate the use of self-adhesive labels for barcodes on a range of the products her company sold. So it actually became quite an interesting project in that there was a history of barcodes over time, what materials were used, where were they used, how were they used. And in the end, she created a supplier guideline to actually explain the best types of self-adhesive labels for barcode labels. Unsurprisingly, she got herself a distinction for that particular project. So you can take little bits and pieces here and bring them all together as one project. So I hope that helps giving you some ideas. So a little bit about the learning outcomes and assessment criteria. Now, I'm sure most of you will be quite familiar with the following slides. In the Unit 4, it has 3 learning outcomes along with the assessment criteria, which I'll go through in a minute. What I've done here is actually shown you what percentage the different learning outcomes will have in the overall mark. So as you can see, the first learning outcome is organising and carrying out the project. Well, that's your introduction, and that's about 15%. Learner shows relevant knowledge to explore the project. Well, that's where you do the hard work. That's 70%. And then pulling it all together is another 15%. So let's look at learning outcome 1. So again, learning outcome, what you need to know and understand, and how you do that is by looking down those 5 assessment criteria. Now, I'm not going to go into each of these individually now. I'm going to do that when I talk about the grading criteria document in a couple of minutes. But what PyABC do for you is that they actually give you a whole list of indicative content. So you can go back and look at, I'll just go back, you can look at select an appropriate packaging topic and set objectives. You can then look at, oops, gone down. You can then look at the indicative content, and you can see there that there are a little bit more information to help you achieve that particular criteria. So it is, and like I say, a lot of text, a lot of information. I'm not going to go through it one by one. We'll pick up on all those as we go through the rest of the presentation. So learning outcome 2 is similar vein. You have to show how to use relevant theory or knowledge to explore the project, and there are 6 criteria in which to do it. So again, page down, and you'll see another list of indicative content. So it's really useful to get all of these in your head and understand what you need to do as you are putting things together. Learning outcome 3 is pulling the project together to actually present the report. You know, you do need to have appropriate writing skills with the appropriate technical terminology, you know, using a standard bibliographical system. Again, I'm going to come back to these as we go on. I will just say now, please do not rely on spell checker. It's quite amazing how many times you will see a word spelt incorrectly in the context. Sometimes, sadly, you can't see the wood for the trees. So, what I'm now going to do is talk about the grading criteria documents. These are published by PyABC, and as you'll see on the next slide, all I have done here is taken the first learning outcome and just listed it onto the page in front of you. PyABC have actually told you how to fail your project. So if you look in the second column, you know, if you actually don't put a workable plan or timings in for the research, then you may well fail. You know, they actually give you a little bit of guidance there. It tells you to organize and carry out the packaging related research project, and they're actually saying that it's advisable to refer to it in the introduction, and if necessary, evidence perhaps of your work plan or the timings or whatever appear in the appendices. But I think the best way to kick off your project is to actually look at the right-hand distinction column and look down those 5 criteria. Because what you can do is have a think about what you want to write about, decide on something, and then take those 5 criteria and actually write, I would personally handwrite them down on a piece of paper and leave a space, a few centimeters of several lines between each of them, and actually just jot down what you're going to do. This is usually the hardest part, because selecting the topic sometimes is actually quite difficult. But you've got to put some clear objectives, and you have to put a packaging brief together. You need a realistic and workable plan that has actually got time-bound monitoring points. Some people might be fortunate and have the ability to use specific software to put plans together. But if you haven't, then maybe an Excel document with just rows and columns for time and action points is quite sufficient. But you need to be able to explain to people what you're going to do. You need to have a justification, and you need to think about, well, we could look at this or we could look at that, and maybe you will discard certain avenues before you even begin for various reasons. And you also need to demonstrate that you do have the ability to have a good background knowledge of the topic you are talking about. Once you've done that, you can then look at the second page, where you need to be able to use this relevant theory and knowledge to explore your project. And again, I'd look in the distinction column, and 2.1 gives you the ability to actually explain how maybe a process or a material, whatever, has evolved over time, either within the business or further afield. It actually sets a context. And remember, the people who are going to read this, sometimes they don't have the same breadth and depth of knowledge of your topic you're talking about. So to actually give that and make it interesting to read is a benefit to the reader and ultimately the examiner. You will need to look at theoretical or other knowledgeable concepts, which you then can evaluate, and they need to be related to the project. So it could be that you are looking at bio-based materials. Do they have to be biodegradable? Or are they just made from biomaterials? And you then need to be able to illustrate the report to justify the argument shown and put it together in a way that is actually logical and, again, easy to read. One of the suggestions, which I'll say now, but come when you are putting your report together, is to use what are called page breaks. So you can actually section different parts of your report as you're putting it together with a page break. So if you have a table or some information and you want to explain the information in the table, well, keep the text with the table. There's nothing worse when you're reading something is to look at a table and then have to turn the page to read the explanation, because you're going backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. And as a reader, that's actually not that easy. So by keeping the table and the text together and using page breaks is actually a really good way of keeping the reader on board. So again, look at how you are going to format, as I say earlier, and put information together. It needs to be presented in a clear way. You may well find that you have lots and lots of data. Well, a lot of that data can actually be put into appendices, and a summary can be put into the findings. You need to be able to then justify what you have found, and there needs to be evidence and logical argument behind that. And you may well be able to talk about the project from starting today might actually have changed, and you may find that the route you started with is not quite the route you're finishing with. So you need to be able to say, well, I wanted to go down this road, but because of, I've had to go down another road. That's fine. You can explain that in this section. Learning outcome 3 is basically how you're going to pull it all together. So I've already mentioned about page breaks, and you can do wrapping text around diagrams or photographs is another good way of keeping text and images together. So it is important that you do think about how the report looks and how it flows. In a way, it's no different from reading a book with chapters. You know where you are, you know where you're going, and there is a logical sequence to it. It needs to have the right technical language. One of the biggest problems is that people will use business acronyms and don't always explain what they mean. That is quite important, and as we'll see shortly, you can, in some cases, either include a list of all the acronyms or abbreviations you're going to use, or you can use little footnotes at the bottom of a page that will actually explain, what a certain acronym or material reference is. And finally, as it says there, it needs to be fully referenced using a standard bibliographical system. And I'll come back to that shortly. So I think this particular document is actually really useful to you, because it does give you a checklist of everything you need to do to actually meet each of the learning outcomes. So let me go on to the next part of the presentation. Where are you going to get your information from? So you do need to do a search for information. So you could do a literature search. there may be, or there may not be actually, but there may be literature on the topic, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But the aim is to inform your own work. So you might find somebody has been talking about the advantages and disadvantages of using alternatives to single-use plastics. You know, that might actually be quite useful. So you can actually bring that into your own work. So see what other people have done. And of course, it might actually give you the opportunity to disagree with people. You might need to reassess your reading skills. Today, there is a plethora of information out there. And depending on what device or books or whatever you're using, you might just need to learn a little bit about skim reading and looking for relevant information that you need. Make notes. Sometimes if you're looking at things on the computer, I will be tempted to press print and take a note of where you've got this information from. So take a copy of the web address. You can paste that into a Word document, but you can also have a hard copy, and you can use a highlighter pen to sort of say, ah, yes, that's a really useful bit of information. So quite an important skill to improve upon. If you've never written a project before and you want to look for help, there are libraries and bookshops. There will be information on websites about this. University websites generally have some really good information that you can usually find, which will help their students. So searching the internet, again, is a fairly obvious source. I've actually put Wikipedia down as a starting point. I know anybody who's gone through academia, they've probably been told, you know, you can't use Wikipedia as a reference. That's true, but Wikipedia generally is a really good place to start looking for information. You can also look at Google Scholar. So I'm giving you the web link there. There is another link to a site called academia.education. That's mainly a scientific site, but you can download information free of charge. And if you are looking for particular books on a topic, you might actually find that there are some secondhand books on different sites, which are actually, you know, quite cost effective to buy. But it's not uncommon to go on somewhere like Google Scholar or Academia, and you might actually get a link to the whole book, depending, like I say, on the topic in question. Another really useful source, of course, is supplier and customer websites. They've got, again, a huge amount of information. And if you go to a packaging show or whatever, you can also usually pick up brochures and so on. And if you are searching for data, then people like Mintel, Euromonitor, Pyra, I haven't put them down, they will often have some really good pieces of information. Now, if you are going to somebody like Mintel or Pyra and you want to report on the future of packaging into, over the next 5 years, they may well be asking you to pay many thousands of euros for that report. But actually, if you know there is a report, then you can actually look for background information that Mintel or others have put together, which will give you a flavour of what is actually in the report. Out of interest, Mintel do a monthly newsletter by email, which is called Mintel Insights. If anybody's interested, I'll put up the link for that. So when it comes to pulling all this information together, what you can't do is just show that you've read and repeated the course material. You need to apply that knowledge and research to the issues you've raised. So you need to have an understanding of that knowledge. But you may actually find there is some material is not relevant, and therefore you need to explain why. What you're doing is showing the examiner that you do have some knowledge and understanding of the topic you are talking about. So again, in terms of argument or analysis and conclusions, you can't just present a summary of arguments, and a short conclusion. Again, you've got to be able to take the different arguments, analyze them, and then come to your own conclusions, depending on the subject, of course, you are doing. And again, just to clarify that, it's just showing that you've actually mastered the material that you're looking at. You may not necessarily agree with other people's work. Fine, in that case, say so, and show and say why. I've put this slide in. Plagiarism is undoubtedly a major issue. So what you can't do is copy and paste from other sources without actually referencing where you've got them from. It is very easy to go onto a page and look for some information about a certain topic or process and go, oh, that's easy. That explains what I want to say, and to copy and paste it straight into a project. Just be aware that it is usually quite easy when you are reading projects to actually see where something has been cut and pasted. If you are going to take an image or a diagram, that's fine. Just make sure you indicate where it's come from. And there are ways in which you can show that in terms of quotation marks or whatever, if you are going to repeat what somebody has said. Again, there's the Harvard referencing system, which will explain how you can do that. So how do you put it all together? Okay, So, as I've said, it needs a clear structure. There is a suggested word count and a layout, as you'll see in a minute. If the topic's broad, as it says there, and you're just going to concentrate on one or two aspects of the subject, then put this in at the beginning. Explain, that this particular topic is very wide-ranging, but I am going to concentrate on X and Y, and then off you go. As I said earlier, you might actually find something that you may be familiar with, but the reader might not be. So you might just want to put a short explanatory note at the foot of the relevant page. That's fine. There's nothing worse when you're reading something and you see a certain phrase used and you think, what on earth is that? And then as the reader, you're actually flicking backwards and forwards, trying to find an explanation of what it actually means. So, if appropriate, put it just at the bottom as a small footer. And it then helps the reader to follow the story. Any references and bibliography will follow appendices. It needs a title page with the project, the date, and your candidate number, and it needs a footer into the whole of the assignment with your number, the level 5 diploma, the date, and it needs a page number. Your name should not appear, and you also need an abstract, which I'll come back to in a minute. Just to a bit more info on references, you do need to acknowledge where you get the information from. Don't present somebody's material ideas without citing a reference, please. So use the Harvard referencing system or something similar to it. You're not going to be marked down if you get a comma in the wrong place. You also need to, or you may well need to have several appendices, because you might want to include lots of technical data or charts, or maybe a copy of a questionnaire that you've run. But make it obvious what you're putting in there. You may have testing regimes that you are doing. Well, what you could do is include a copy of the full test in the appendix. That might actually be quite interesting to the reader. Coming back to the abstract, although it's at the beginning, you can't write it until you've finished. I know that's a bit obvious. So usually 300 to 400 words, and basically it's a short introduction to what the reader is going to find when they go through the project. Like I say, it's probably only half a page, but neither appendices or abstract is included in the word count. It's marked using pass, merit, and distinction. So a pass is 50 to 59, a merit is 60 to 69, and a distinction is 70% plus. And of course, copyright remains with you. So you will have to submit a cover sheet. You will be asked to put on your candidate number. You will sign a declaration to say that it is your own work. There is a suggested word count of between 5,000 and 7,500. Personally, if you go above 7,500, I'm not going to complain too much if it is all relevant material. Don't try bulking the project out with other information that's not particularly needed. Needs to be A4 sized paper. I say typed one side only, but as you'll see below, there has been a change in the last few days because PyABC are asking for just an electronic copy to be submitted now. But when you are constructing your document, set it to A4. It needs to be Arial, font size 12, double line spaced, and number your pages. And then in the bottom, put your footer with candidate number, the qualification, date, and page. So you need to attach this cover sheet to your project. So 2 documents, please, and send it to the team at the Training Academy in Grantham. That will be Sarah with Joe, and they will then forward it on to PyABC for marking. So here's a work plan, and it's certainly not in tablets of stone. So choose your topic, fairly obvious. Use Learning Outcome 1 and the 5 assessment criteria to produce an outline, as I said earlier. Then maybe ask your tutor or other people involved for feedback. Put together a work plan to find out how long each element of the plan will take. It might be days, it might be weeks, could be months. Put together section headings and what you're going to write about in each of them. Do your research on existing literature. That's still linking up to Learning Outcome 1, the 5th assessment criteria. You're collecting more material. You might be collecting it electronically, you might be collecting it in a big heap of paper, but find a way of referencing it and sorting it out so that you know where everything is. Begin the work. So whatever you're going to do, line trials, it might be evaluating current situation on something, but begin the work. Draft your outline paragraphs and sections as you carry on. Keep going, and then write up your first draft. At that point, you may again want some feedback. So, work colleagues or tutors, again, usually are happy to go through things and make suggestions. And from that, you may be able to edit and refine and so on. Then produce your final draft. And forgive me for saying this, read and reread and check your spelling and grammar. And then hopefully you're ready then to produce and submit the final version. So there are some examples of packaging projects which Joe, Sarah, myself can send to you. There are 3. I'm sure some of you will already have had them. You will get support and feedback. It can sometimes be a bit frustrating, a bit lonely. all you have to do is ask. So if you need to get hold of Sarah, there are her contact details. If you need to get hold of me, again, I'm only a phone call away. So that's what we've done in the last 60 minutes. And the question is now, has anybody got any questions, please?
So Ian, if you look at the bottom then, the Q&A.
Oh, sorry. At the bottom.
Okay.
Oh, Q&A, sorry.
Yeah,
Right, beg your pardon. It's at the top on mine. Question from me, Kate. Currently partway through the literary review. Unfamiliar. Okay. That's a really good question, Kate. Thank you for that one. Literary review, that is more of a scientific or a technical review. So it depends on what your project is. In some cases, there won't be a literary review required. You just need to say why. You know, if you're looking at, you know, line improvements or, you know, minimizing or optimizing the weight of a component, there may well not be information. But I'm quite happy to talk through your particular project at a later date. So I hope that helps that one. And then I've got, what do you include? Next one is, would you include how the packaging is made within your project? Actually, yes, I would. But it's got to be relevant. I think that's really helpful to show the reader and the examiner that you actually do know what you're talking about. Now, should it be brief or in detail? It depends. Lovely word, lovely phrase. I would, you know, if it's appropriate, I would make it in detail if it is relevant to your particular project. So, right. Is it possible to present more than one project and let you? I think what the tutor would do here, because this is from Quadio, yeah, Sean Baptiste, right? I would sort of say, I am looking to do one of the following. What do you think? So when you say more than one project, I'm assuming you won't have started it. If it's ideas, fine, talk to a tutor, no problem. Kate, oh, looking at barrier removal in film. Thank you, Kate. Going back to your question. Kate, you may well find that there is information out there about, you know, barrier removal reports. So when it says a literature review, I may well be scouring the internet, or I might be looking at Packaging News and seeing if Packaging News has had any reports on this. So that's on, right. It's jumping about a little bit. Okay, looking back. Right, Elliot. Good afternoon, Elliot. If I were to choose a topic which includes writing a best practice process SOP, gosh, that's another one about it depends. To a certain extent, it depends on how big it is, Elliot. If you've got an SOP that is, 50 pages long, then maybe I wouldn't want to see that in an appendix. But, if there are elements of it or the best bit, yeah, put it in the appendix. Omar Warwick, hello Omar. Is it possible to get a reminder of our assigned tutors and time limits? Well, I am the designated Unit 4 tutor, but that does not mean to say you can't use either the other online tutors for help and advice, or if you've come on a taught course, you've obviously met other people. So for argument's sake, if somebody was doing things, and I'm just taking yours, Omar, because I know who you work for, if you're looking at metal packaging and you wanted some help and advice on metal packaging, then I'm sure people like Bev Page and John Elliott will be delighted to help you where appropriate. So I'm now looking at Joe to see if there are any more questions.
There aren't any more questions there. I did put in the chat in case anybody hasn't seen. Oh, sorry, Garen's got one, but just while I finish, just put a note in the chat that normally there are obviously specific dates that we expect people to send their projects in by, but because at the moment with everything upside down, some of the markers aren't at work, so they're more available. So PIBC have said that you can send them in at any time.
Yeah.
Right now, this isn't going to go on forever, as was a question from Charlotte. There will be a time when everything gets back to normal, then obviously the dates will go back into place. But right now, while we have more people around to mark and more people have more time, get it done now, basically.
Okay, so before I go to Gavin's question, I'll just look at, I'll just finish that little bit about time limits. What I don't want people to do is look at a submission date. For argument's sake, there is one coming up, which is the 1st of May. And you might be looking at your watch and going, oh my goodness me, I've got to get it ready and submitted by the 1st of May. I would much rather you be a day, a week, a month late and get it right than submit it and fail. It's not the end of the world. I think what is really important is, set yourself a submission date, because that will focus your mind. But you don't know what's around the corner. Current situation, nobody does. So I like I say, I wouldn't rush to get things in if for whatever reason you can't. All right, there's a question from Gavin Stephen. I'm considering a project looking at trends in the packaging market. Suggestions for sources to use about the size of the UK EU packaging market trends of specific items. Oh, that's a really good question, Gavin. First things first, I would look at packaging magazines. There's a range of them out there. Packaging Today, retail packaging, depending on your topic, there's ones on polymers, pharmaceutical magazines, whatever the topic is. There are a range of publishers who are sending out or producing magazines and online information. So I would certainly start there. If you want specific information, I'd probably go on to Mintel, Euromonitor, Pyra websites. Again, as I said earlier, that's tricky because some of this information is only available at a large cost to the company. But I would suggest, you know, that if you don't ask, you don't get. So it's not going to harm to pick up the telephone and speak to one of these companies, explain what you are doing, and ask if they can help you. So, is that the last one, Joe, at the moment?
Yeah, that looks like the last one. We've gone a little bit over the time that we said, but it can't be helped. When you've got questions, you need answers, so that's fine. Of course, anybody has any questions after this, then they're very welcome, of course, to either contact myself or Ian, one at a time, please, for Ian, bless him, to go through any of those bits. I hope this has been really useful for you. Lots of points there for you to take notes of. I have been asked if we can have the PowerPoint to be sent out, which is not a problem at all. I will also send this as well, so that you've got any other bits and pieces that Ian has mentioned that obviously aren't on the notes there. So you've got everything there to look back up whatever you want to. I think that's probably all for now. Are you all done now, Ian?
I think so. I'm just looking. There are, Joe, it says 53 people, or 35. Sorry.
Yes, there was 40 people, and plus us at the beginning. So there's a few people who had to pop off now because it's gone past the 2. So
Okay.
there's another 30 odd who have signed up to watch it at a later date. So it's going to be around for anyone to refer to whenever they need to. So if any of your colleagues haven't been able to access this, please let them know they still can do. They just need to pop me an email and I'll send them the link. Okay.
Yeah. Well, as I said earlier, you only have to ask. And I know one or two of you, your situations are changing, and yes, we are in a bit of a state of flux at the moment. I am more than happy to just sit down and talk things through, either by phone, Skype, WhatsApp, whatever. Not a problem. In fact, I'd be happy to do it, because ultimately, at the end of the day, what you should get out of this project is something you should be proud of, because it's actually hopefully pushing you out of your comfort zone a little bit, yeah, to find answers to things that you actually didn't know, you know, and maybe, you know, maybe in years to come, you look back and go, actually, that was a really good time to do that project, because you won't probably get this opportunity again to do it in such depth. So hopefully that will help. Brilliant. Hopefully, Joe, that's enough from me. So I'll just wish everybody
it's been some
very good rest of the day, depending on where you are in the world.
Smashing. Thank you very much, Ian. So there have been some lovely comments from people watching. So I'm glad that it's been of benefit, and to say anything else we can do, just shout. So take care, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye now.